Lovely little American voice. Okay, so listen, thanks again for coming. It's great to see a few familiar faces and some new faces as well here. I know a few of you I've been emailing over and back with over the last while. So we're mostly looking at the key action 1, the mobility projects and stuff today. I'll explain what all that jargon means in a few minutes. But just to kind of reverse back a tiny bit first in terms of Erasmus Plus and what is it? I think people get a bit caught up. They hear of Erasmus and they think of, you know, your student years and going off and doing a semester abroad. But there is a lot more to it than that, and it covers a lot more sectors. So here in Lergus, we actually look after 5 different sectors. We look after the adult education, which we're talking about here today, but also the schools, vocational, youth, and sport. Sport is a new one. We only started doing sport in January, so it's still very new and very exciting. So if you know anyone working in the sports sector, send them our way. There's some really exciting opportunities for coaches to go off on international trainings and stuff. But we're here today to talk about adult ed, and I just said I would pull up a definition for you. So this comes straight out of our program guide, which is our big book of all the info you need to know about Erasmus Plus. But I think what's important to see on here is that this definition that we use for adult education includes quite a variety of adult ed. It includes the formal, the non-formal, and the informal. And I know I had a look before today at the list of who we had signed up today, and there was a huge variety of organizations from all of those sectors. So I really encourage you, you know, if you're not sure, is this the right space for me, give us a shout if you're not sure if you're fitting into adult ed. But really this piece it's quite a broad, you know, it includes a lot of different types of organizations. So I do have some examples because I figured that might be the best way to show you that instead of me trying to make it up. So these are the different organizations that got funding from us in 2022. I see a bunch of people are still arriving, so I'll slow down here for a second and we let those last few in. Welcome anyone that's just coming in. It's good to have you here.
Yeah, I'd say to Larissa as well. Hi, Larissa. Larissa was at the event on Tuesday, Gemma.
Yes.
You'd recognise her looking, so
Larissa, this is more or less the same presentation you got on Tuesday, but you're very welcome to stay if that.
But yeah. If it is, I would jump off because I there's an event I have to go later on. Yeah. So
were you hoping to come to the Key Action 2 session?
Yeah.
Okay. I will add you to my list. I'll send you on the notes. That was this morning and we recorded it.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Sorry about that.
That's okay. No, I had a feeling that's what happened. Okay.
Okay. Sorry about that. Thank you so much.
Good luck. Okay. Talk to you soon, Larissa.
Bye.
So hi, everyone else has just come in. So I'll come back one tiny bit just for a second. So this was just a definition. I wanted to show you all of adult ed and the different kind of sectors that it includes. And these were some examples then. So these are the projects that got funded under adult education last year. I think we're going to have a really interesting slide. I'm looking forward to doing up the next one for this year and all the different organizations. But there's a nice mix here, as you can see. So we have the likes of the Living Commons, that's a kind of an artist collective down in Cork. We have Culture, that's a migrant organisation up in Navan. ADHD Ireland are doing a really nice partnership project looking at adults with ADHD and how to support them best. You see a lot of the kind of local partnerships and those kind of development companies. We also have a lovely project with INAR, the Irish Network Against Racism, and that's kind of looking at how do we support people doing anti-racist education in their own resilience and looking after themselves. I've also got the ETBI logo up there, so we work with a lot of the ETBs across Ireland as well as ETBI nationally. So just to show you, there is quite a mix. So hopefully for all of you that are here on the call, you will see yourself represented in this and that you'll see that this is something that is for you and that you're more than welcome to be part of. So I always include this slide, and some of you that have been at my events before are probably sick of looking at it now. But I think it's important. So this is the kind of 4 overarching priorities that we have in Erasmus Plus. These are something that you don't necessarily need to do a project that is themed on these events, but you do need to make sure that they're considered somewhere in the background, somewhere in the logistics of how you're running your event, that you're thinking about all of these. So are you making sure that it's inclusive, that you're including a diverse range of people, that they can access the opportunities that you're offering? Are you including those kind of digital tools and making sure that people are able to access the information that they need? All of that kind of stuff. the environmental piece, I think, especially when we're talking about these, what we call mobility projects, these projects where we're encouraging people to travel around Europe, I think there's a little bit of an elephant in the room there, because of course we're encouraging you all to travel, but it's very hard to get off of this island without taking a plane or a boat, unless any of you are experienced kayakers maybe. But it's about that balancing act, I suppose, of finding the most environmental way of you know, minimizing your impact on the climate and all of that kind of stuff. And then also, I think this fourth priority, especially for the adult ed sector, is really relevant. So it's all about how we kind of participate in society and in democratic institutions. It's all about having people's voices heard. And I think a lot of you and the kind of work that you do, this is the sort of thing that you're probably doing anyway within that work. So as I said, these are not something that you need to say, right, okay, I'm going to do an environmental project, but they are something that you just need to keep in the back of your head as you're going along and as you're working through your project ideas. So I'm going to move on to what we can actually apply for. Mark, interrupt me if any of these messages in the chat need answering straight away, because I can't read and talk at the same time.
No, don't worry, I've no problem with
That's
that.
not a skill that I have. Okay, so what we're talking about today, this is a little bit of jargon, but you need a little bit of it in order to navigate all this European stuff. So there's two different kind of actions that we support. So the main one we're going to talk about today is key action 1. It's called mobilities of learner and staff. And mobility in this context, I mean, I think I always think about mobility scooters when I hear of it, but what it means is movement. It's people traveling around Europe and interacting and meeting with each other. Key Action 2 is another type of projects that we offer, therefore you kind of work in partnership with other organizations. Now, I'm not going to cover that today, but we did an info session on that this morning, which we recorded. So if anybody wants more info on that one, just let me know in the chat and I can send you on the recording of this morning's session and you can get some more info on that. So let's look at this Key Action 1. So this is all about the learners and the staff moving and traveling around Europe. Now, again, I've just pulled another definition out of our program guide for you. And really, I just wanted to stick that up because I want to let you know that the word staff also includes volunteers. I know some of you on the call here are from your kind of NGOs and smaller organizations that might not have a big staff, but you can also include your volunteers in that, or maybe if you have a board of management or something like that, that would be quite involved in your organization. So as long as they're relevant to the activity, they're included. So I just wanted to let you know that. So what can you actually do? So this is the first thing. So this is sending your staff off on courses and training. We often see this as kind of a very first step. It's a great thing if you've never done Erasmus Plus before and you want to get going. This is a great way to do it because it's not too complicated to set up. You tell us why it is, what the gap is, what the gap in knowledge is. You find a course that's relevant, that's going to meet that gap and meet that need for you, and you send your staff member off. They come back, they share the learning with the team. They've also probably met about 20 or 30 other people on that training course. So they've come back with loads of ideas and inspiration from those international people they've met. They probably have a list of email addresses they might want to follow up with and continue and do some other projects later. So it's a really great one to start with. The next opportunity then is job shadowing. So again, this is for your staff, and this really is getting a bit more kind of deeper into another organization. So if you're going somewhere, but you're actually getting to spend some time there. So it's not just a course and it starts and it finishes, but you're in the building. You're seeing all the kind of little subtle things that we know in adult ed are so important. How do we welcome people in? Who makes that cup of tea and sits people down for the bit of a chat and the welcome and the signposting to all the other supports, all that kind of stuff that we do in adult ed. So job shadowing is a really interesting one to just really get a feel for somewhere and get a sense of how they do their work and what are the best practices and learn and share while you're there. Again, you might tie this in, so you might go off to a training course first. You might meet some people there that you think might be good to job shadow with, and 6 months later you might do the job shadow. So this is very much pick and mix. All these different activities and opportunities I'm showing you, these can all form part of one project if that's what makes sense for you and for your organization. I put this one up, but I'll admit we don't get many people doing it. This is teaching and training assignments. This is where you actually go off to work in another organization in another country. I know a lot of you are very tightly stretched, and I can't imagine your manager has been too keen on sending you off for a couple of months. But just so you know, it is there. It is an option, and we can chat about it more if people are interested in it. So then I'm going to move on to the learner opportunities. So I think this is just really exciting for me. This only came in 2021. We haven't seen a lot of organizations doing it yet. We've got a few applications in under the spring deadlines, and they will all be traveling quite soon. And I cannot wait to get their videos and photos and stories and hear all about how it's gone. But I think it's just a really great opportunity for the learners that you work with, for them to be able to travel themselves. Again, I've just pulled a definition for you here. All these definitions are out of a book called the Program Guide. The Program Guide is a bit of a beast of a document. I'll warn you all, it's 400 pages. You don't ever need to read all of those. I don't think I've read all of those. I'd say I've maybe read 100 of them at this stage. But it is where you get all these kind of bits of really important information. But I just want to show you, so the learners and how we define learners is people participating in a program. So it doesn't have to be too formalized, depending on your organization. If you've got a life skills program, if you've got an older people's group, you know, whatever that is, if they are participating in a program with your organization, that's absolutely fine. It doesn't need to be registered and enrolled on an accredited course or anything like that. It's quite flexible. So what can you do again with your learners? This is probably the most common one we're seeing in terms of getting started. So that's where you go as a group. Now, a group only has to be 2 people. It doesn't have to be a huge group. I kind of describe this as like a youth exchange for adults. For those of you that are working in that community and voluntary sector, you might have come across those. But really, it's about bringing a group of your learners or your participants off to another country to meet with their peers, to share, to chat about life, to figure out what it's like to live there, to talk about the challenges, to learn something new. It's incredibly flexible in terms of the activities that you can do while you're there. You see there's a few examples there in terms of peer learning, work-based learning, volunteering, you know, whatever it is. But it's really just about that exchange piece. It's about meeting other people where they're at in another country and having that life experience. So that's probably the most straightforward one, whereas when you go as a group, you can go for between 2 and 30 days, and that doesn't include travel days. So you might travel for a day or two, spend 2 or 3 days there and travel a day or two back. That's fine. And the other piece, just to let you know, that you can also do individual. So they don't necessarily have to go as a group. We're not seeing as much of this, but I think it's one that's going to take off in the next few years, and I think it's a really interesting opportunity. The main difference is it's not really about the travel arrangements, the group versus the individual. It's about the learning objectives. So if you're happy to do one set of learning outcomes for the whole group, then you go with the group. If you're individualizing your learning outcomes and everyone's going to have a slightly different experience when they're abroad, then it's called an individual. So that's how we divide it. You'll see there's slightly more money available if you're going as individuals. That's because you're going to put a bit more work into those learning objectives and defining all of that. But we can tease all of this out with you anyway if you think this is something of interest. So that's the learner opportunities. I'll take a breath for a minute now in case there's any urgent questions there.
No, I seem to be on top of everything.
Cool. Okay, I will keep rolling. So these are just a few other opportunities then. So the invited experts is a really interesting one. So that's kind of where you're having an international experience without actually leaving the country. You're bringing that person to you. Now, we often see this as a combination, so that maybe you might go off to a training course, maybe send 1 or 2 of your staff, and then 6 months later, that trainer might come back to your organization to run a workshop for the whole team. That said, it doesn't have to be as part of something else. It can be a standalone. So that's just a kind of an interesting option that you can have, and it can sometimes reach a bigger group if maybe it's not possible for your staff to travel and to take the time off and all of that that's needed, that you can bring the person to you. It would still be someone coming from abroad. So it still has that international experience part of it. There's also some small funds there to support you to host teachers in training coming from other countries. And then I've included a few kind of inclusion supports that we have here as well. So if you're thinking, okay, this all sounds really interesting, but I'm a little bit terrified at the prospect of taking a bunch of my learners and hopping on an airplane. So what you can put in for is a preparatory visit. This is where basically like a recce visit. This is where you go over in advance, maybe 1 or 2 of your staff, you check the place out, you chat to the hosting partner, you make sure everything is above board, you plan out your timetable, but you also can do the kind of practical stuff. You can figure out, you know, how to get from the airport to the train station to the hostel or to wherever you're staying. You can suss out where you might need to go to get medical equipment for someone that needs it. You know, any of these little practical things that is much easier to do as a staff of 1 or 2 than with your group of learners standing beside you. So there's support for that. There's also a lot of inclusion support built into the program. So if your staff, if your learners, or even your staff need accompanying people, that is possible. So if they need a personal assistant, maybe they have a disability, something like that. We've seen people put in for sign language interpreters, that kind of thing. So whatever it is that you need, those accompanying people is possible. And there's also then inclusion support for just really practical supports. And I always kind of struggle to give examples of this because it can be big and broad, and really it's just, if there is a barrier there for someone that you can meet, we can try and support that, and it's all done on a case-by-case basis. So an example we had of a project there last year, we had a group of adults that were traveling that were all visually impaired. So they reached out to us and they said, hey, we cannot take this group on the metro in the foreign country, it is too difficult. So they're going to rent a bus when they get to the foreign country, and that makes perfect sense for the group that they're with. They're also going to bring a translator with them. And I thought this was a really interesting one because normally we try to encourage that you learn a little bit of the language and you get used to figuring out your way in a foreign language. But actually, if you think about it, if you're a group of visually impaired adults, you can't do that bit of sign language and, oh, come here, we'll all go over here, and all of this stuff that we can do normally when we're abroad. You also can't read the facial expressions of someone, so you can't understand what's happening. So a small language barrier becomes a huge barrier if you have a visual impairment. So that was just one example. But really it's down to you and your groups and the kind of challenges they might have, and you can put in for those kind of on a case-by-case basis. So that's the inclusion support. So as I said, listen, all of these opportunities are all kind of pick and mix. So to give you another example of a really interesting project we had come in the spring, this was one where it was an organization that is mostly working in the kind of vocational sector and practical work skills and all of that. But during COVID, they've been doing a lot of kind of well-being and that sort of program. So they're moving into that adult education space, and they wanted to do a bit more on this. So they've done a really interesting project where they've pulled from a few different opportunities. So their first piece was going over to do a job shadowing. They're sending a staff member over to a country, an organization in a country that's running really nice health and well-being programs. They're going to observe that, see how it goes. They're going to come back here. They're going to set up a pilot in Ireland. They're going to recruit 10 or 20 students to get involved in that. They're then going to do learner mobility after about 6 months. So they're going to bring those learners over to the other institution to see how it goes there. They're going to get their feedback. They're going to build all that feedback into their program development back here at home. And then I think about another 6 months later, they were doing the invited experts. So they were bringing the tutor from the other organization back to Ireland to help run the kind of evaluation of the pilot with the whole staff team. So by the end of about a year and a half, they were going to have a fabulous new well-being program that had been tested by the staff and by the learners. And I just thought that was a really, really nice way of using all these different opportunities and building them into one project. So that's just another example, and they're going to get very sick of me using that example, but until I get a better one, I just think it's fabulous. And I can't wait to hear how they get on. I think the first few trips have happened already. The staff trip has happened already. So this is just the countries you can go to in case anyone is wondering that. So it's the EU member states. And I have just been signed out of Zoom, and that's not great, but hopefully that won't kick me out of anything else here. Somebody else must have logged into our account. No, I'm still here. Yeah, they haven't kicked me out. Okay. So here are the countries. So yeah, it's the 27 EU member states, and then the 6 others, which I always put on this list because I can never remember them when I'm on the spot. So there's quite a mix there. I will say to you, if you're getting started in this, we're a little bit spoiled in Ireland in that the English language tends to be the most common language as a shared language across the continent. If you're looking for training courses, even if they're in any kind of a country, they're quite often run through English because that is the common language that people tend to use. So we are kind of spoiled rotten. It does help us a little bit. Not to say we shouldn't be learning other languages, and we absolutely should. And we also have kind of online platforms to help people do a bit of prep in a foreign language before they travel abroad and all of that kind of stuff. But don't let that put you off. I think a few people got a bit of a shock when the UK left Erasmus and they couldn't go there anymore. But honestly, there's loads of opportunities around the rest of Europe. So here's just a little bit about what the actual money looks like, because I'm sure you're sitting there going, this all sounds great, Gemma, but how much can we get? So really, it kind of, as you fill in your application form and you say, right, I want to send this many people to this country for this activity, the application form starts to tot this all up for you. So you don't really need to be too aware of this, but it's just good to know. So the organization support, that is basically for your own organizational costs, whether it's administration costs or whatever it is. There's different amounts. It goes from 100 up to 500, and it really depends on the type of activity. So the 100 is for like the training courses, where there's not a huge amount of prep and work in there for you to do. Whereas the 500 is if you're sending an individual learner off for a long-term placement, because of course there's a lot of support needed over that period. The individual support, so that kind of covers your food and accommodation while you're abroad. I didn't bother putting the rates in here because it's a per participant per day and it varies by country. So it's kind of dependent on the cost of living. I will say it generally does cover you and does break even, but probably not going to help you stay in a 5-star hotel. But if you're happy to stay in kind of fairly average accommodation, it normally does break even for you. The travel cost, similarly, it's based on a kind of a distance traveled. It's like a bird's eye, this point to this point, and you get a unit cost. And it's up to you to find good value travel within that. So you might have to take the early morning flight or the late night flight or these kind of things to make it balance out. But it normally comes out fairly okay. Those preparatory visits that I mentioned, that's just a lump sum. It's €575, and that's up to you then to figure out how you spend that on travel, accommodation, whatever. And the inclusion support. So this is just a really good to know that if you're working with participants with fewer opportunities, which I imagine most of you on the call today probably are, as soon as you let us know that person has fewer opportunities, you automatically get an extra €100 per person on your grant. And that really just acknowledges that you're going to spend a bit more time supporting that person and helping them to participate fully. And then I said there's also those kind of real costs if you have specific costs you need to claim for as well. But it's a funny one. We get a lot of people, they don't just tick that box. It's a sort of a, you tell us how many people you have with fewer opportunities, and people tend to miss that and they miss out on these funds. And I know for a fact that they're working with people who they're supporting through all kinds of barriers. So it is important to note it. And the definition, we can give you that as well, of people with fewer opportunities. It's quite big and broad. It includes everything from being from a rural or remote area to people with disabilities, people from a migrant background. I forget. It's quite big, so it would cover probably a lot of the people that you're working with. So this was just to kind of show you the breakdown of how that funding sort of works. So if you're taking 5 learners, 2 staff to France, so you'll see the organizational support is only €100, but then if you're doing a staff mobility for a job shadowing, the organizational support jumps up. Equally, I think, so this one, the first example was France, the second example was Turkey. So you'll see the travel is lower for France than for Turkey, but the individual support is higher. Because the distance is not so far, but the cost of living is higher. So these things all kind of tot up as you're working through the application form. And they all calculate out for you, and it gives you a gist of what you might receive. So before I will turn off these slides in a minute and we can have a bit of a chat and we can have some questions on this, I just want to show you a few of these. So there are links in these slides. When we email them out to you later, these will be hyperlinked. But just to say, there is a platform on our website where you can see all of the previously funded Irish projects. So if you want to have a look there, see if there's any names you recognise that you might want to have a chat with, reach out to, get some tips from them. You can also look up all of the European-wide projects. You can filter that by theme and by topic. So if you're trying to find someone working on a particular thing, you might be able to reach out to them and see if they might be someone you want to work with. We also have a fantastic platform called Ipale, and my colleague Mark here is from Ipale. Mark, do you want to give us a quick spiel?
Yeah, what I'd say about Ipale, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, and those of you who are as well, is it's kind of a first step really as well, getting on there and seeing what's going on, making the connections beforehand, because it can be hard for people with mobility projects to think, well, where am I going to go and what's the purpose, what am I going to see, and like who am I going to meet? So it's a platform for anyone involved in adult learning across Europe, and I think the Irish community on there is about 1,800 people. But it really is a chance to engage with and look at your counterparts all across Europe, make connections, read their content. But when you sign up to that, if you want to kind of reach out and contact me, there is good ways to do it in regards to making sure that you've filled in your profile, you've listed your organization so that people know who you are. when you're looking, when you want to engage with other people, you kind of have to put your best foot forward. But it's a great platform to watch what's going on and get engaged ahead of doing mobility. I think that's
Thanks,
fair.
Mark.
Yeah.
And like I can say to you all that Mark is fantastic for following up with people. If you sign up for the first time, you're going to get a message from him straight away being like, "Hi there, how can I help?" And he will help you make the most out of the platform.
And it's not
He'll
copied
be
and
smiling.
pasted
You've had
either.
this experience lately. But you know, and I think that's something that we try to do our best in Ergus, is we try to really be those hands-on support people, because we appreciate that this European space is not the easiest to navigate. There is a bit of jargon to get through. There are a few bureaucratic hoops. We get that, we know. So we're here to do our best to try and support you through that. Okay, what else do I have here now? So this is our deadline. So just to know, the next deadline is the 4th of October. It's 11 o'clock Irish time. If you're reading documents on the Commission website, it's going to say noon, but noon is Brussels time. Please do not get caught out by that. I hate if people miss the deadline by an hour. We can't move it. It's a fixed deadline. So it's 4th of October. If that is a bit too soon for any of you that are here that are brand new to all of this, the next one will be in February. So it does come around twice a year, so don't panic. But I would say if you have a bit of an inkling of an idea, go for it in October. Why not? Give it a go. If you're not successful, you will get a letter from us. You will get specific kind of bullet point feedback of here's where you fell down, here's what to improve the next time. We can have a call with you, we can have a meeting with you. You know, this is all part of what we offer. So if you're thinking about this at all, it's worth giving it a go. I've stuck in a few other slides here, just really these are for later on when I email these out. These have links and bits and pieces in them. But just to say, we have 2 more events coming up between now and the deadline. So the next one is an application clinic. That is a much more kind of detailed session than today. We literally pull up the application form on the screen. We go through the questions, we go through the marking scheme. We tell you exactly what we're looking for. My colleagues from the school sector are leading that one. I won't be on the call, but I will be hearing about it afterwards, any questions that came up. And I'm also doing a drop-in session on the Friday before the deadline. So if you have any last minute panics, I'll be online for about an hour and you can just pop in and come in and ask your questions. So those links will work for you. You'll be able to register for any of those. Also just want to let you know, we run a lot of events ourselves that are separate from these projects. So just to kind of get you started, to help you meet people and make connections and find people that you might want to go and visit and job shadow with, or all of those kind of things. So we have one that's coming up in October in Malahide. It's called How Erasmus Mobilities Can Facilitate Transversal Skills. We had a planning meeting with the facilitator yesterday. It's all coming along. It's going to be fabulous. There'll be about 10 Irish at that and about 30 international people. So you get a chance to meet all those contacts and make new connections without having to actually leave the country, because it's in Malahide, but it'll still feel like an international event. And then if you would rather something more exotic, we do also have one coming up in December in France. And that's all about those learner mobilities. So those opportunities for your learners themselves. Now, we only have about 2 places on that, so there probably will be a selection, but certainly throw your name in the hat if you think it might be of interest. And then the other one I wanted to mention to you, this is our tool fair, which is coming up in October. This is a huge event. It's in Dunboyne Castle. There's going to be about 150 people at it from all over Europe. And the focus is on mental health. So if any of you are working in that space, I think this is something really exciting to consider. It's very much, the tool fair concept is where we get organizations that have their own tools and their own resources and they want to share them with you. So it's all about peer sharing. When you sign up, you have the option to actually offer to run a workshop or present your work in some way, but you also don't have to. You can completely just come as a participant and learn and share, you know, on the day. And these events are all 100% funded as well. I think the France one, there's probably a small participation fee. It's about 60 quid, but the Irish ones is generally no fee. So, you know, people sometimes say to me, Gemma, that sounds too good to be true, but it is. It actually is. So I'm pretty excited about this one in Dunboyne. I think it's going to be good. So in terms of your next steps then, so if you haven't ever applied to us before, you'll need to get an organisation ID. There's a link there that'll show you how to do that and walk you through the process. It's not too complicated. The programme guide, as I said to you, is that big book that gives you all the information. Don't have a heart attack when you download it. It is 440 pages, but you only need to read about 10 of them. You just find the chapter on adult learner mobilities. That's all you need to look at. I have the link there for the application form as well. They're already up. You can start working on them. I would say if you're thinking of coming to the application clinic in a couple of weeks' time, go in and have a good go at the application form first. And then when you come to the application clinic, you'll know what your questions are. You'll know what you're stuck on and any bits that you need a hand with. That's it. The last slide is just my email address, but you're all going to get a message from me at the end of this anyway. So you'll all have my details and you're very welcome to follow up with me afterwards. So I think that was most of what I wanted to say to you. We will turn off the recording and we'll throw it over to you guys